I wanna find a place that's for conversation, where they discuss all the latest movies, or when something big happens in the news. See, that's us, what are we talking about? So what are we talking about today? Yeah.
Hello everybody, and welcome to another Carcast. It is Monday, it is another Carcast. By the way, so yes, last week I took some time in the video to explain my upload schedule and then fucking failed to upload by the time I said I was going to, in terms of YouTube. Fuck, man. Every once in a while, you'll upload a video and you think everything is going good. Then you check when that video should be uploaded by now. Look, somehow the whole thing either failed, canceled, something bullshit. So that's what happened this last time. And yeah, so I had to re-upload it. That's why I took it. So this podcast will for sure be up Wednesday. So yeah, today's Carcast is going to be all about I guess it would be called the Three Body Trilogy by Cixin Liu. So I've already done a review for the Three Body Problem when I finished that book a while ago now. It was probably almost a few months ago. I don't know, maybe a year. But anyways, so you guys know my thoughts on that. But the thing is, now that I've listened to all three books, my opinion has changed a little bit. Like, I love this trilogy of books, and it's definitely not for everyone. And one thing is, like, so the story aspect of the book is a little confusing, but it all ties together in the end, and that's the way they do that is really awesome. But that would be, I would say, the weakest part. So if you think you're gonna love this story, you might not. You really might not. And I can't recommend you getting this book for the story, because I think I love the story, and I think that it's an incredible trilogy of books. So basically, the first book, the Three Body Problem, is all about basically, so Earth has this video game where where basically you can go in and try and figure out the problem, where there's this civilization who revolves around three suns, and it's just a mathematics problem, basically a physics problem. So that's what the first book is. And then at the end, basically, it turns out that the video game that they've been playing is a representation of a real world, and it's a representation of a real world, and those people on that world, they call themselves Trisolarans. It's Trisolaris. They basically find an Earthling that will cooperate with them, and they use their help to slowly, they decided that they're going to take over the planet. And basically the end of the book leaves you with the Trisolarans are going to be here in like 400 years or 500 years or something. Humanity must prepare. And then the second book is a lot of that preparation, but it also involves the relationship between Earth and Trisolaris, and then also the relationship between Earth, humans, and the rest of the universe all together, where the reason why the second book is called The Dark Forest is because the basically moral of the story is essentially there's these so essentially the moral of the story is that the universe is a dark forest, basically full of things that want to kill you. It's like a dog-eat-dog world out there, or universe, where basically you need to show everybody that you're non-threatening, or they'll automatically think you're threatening, basically, kind of thing. And the third book explores it a little bit more, where Earth has multiple different ways that they're going to prepare for this Tri-Solarian invasion. And one of the ways that they're going to prepare is by so the three different ways are lightspeed ships, this thing called the Black Domain. I don't remember what the third one is, but anyways, basically humanity goes through all these different phases, and like that's one of the cool things about this book is that it shows an evolution of humanity over hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's really interesting, and I think it's actually quite accurate. I mean, I don't know for sure. It's fiction, but I really do think it's quite accurate as to what would actually happen were this situation to arise. Now, one thing that's a little bit strange, I guess you could say, considering that I'm a white man from Canada, this was written by a Chinese woman who grew up during whatever it's called, the age where basically China was secluded from the rest of the world, and especially from Western influences. And so it's a very different point of view that this book is written from, but it adds some very, very intriguing insight into how other people think. And like it's from a different point of view, but it still is like the events that happen make sense from my point of view as well, right? And one of the things that I found very interesting, and I believe this was in the second book, The Dark Forest, where it talks about how when humans, like after hundreds and hundreds of years, humans are slowly working on trying to figure out what to do against the Tri-Solarians, because the Tri-Solarians sent these things called sophons, which are basically protons, 11-dimensional protons that they can use for faster than light. They're also made from entangled particles, making faster than light speed communication and whatnot possible, and they're able to spy on Earth and prevent Earth from advancing certain scientific fields. Basically, they make it so that you can't get consistent tests from particle accelerators and whatnot, so it makes it so that portion of physics comes to a halt. And so they have to use other means to try and figure out their way around the Tri-Solarian invasion and whatnot. And it just spans over these years. And one of the things that happens is after a bunch of years, humans, because they're all working together for this one cause, it causes there to be one language amongst the entire planet, and that language is a cross between Mandarin and English, which to me makes perfect sense. Right now, English is the business language of the world, where most business is conducted in English. Mandarin is the #1 most spoken language on the planet, because the number of Chinese people that speak Mandarin, or altogether people that speak Mandarin, is a massive number. And so it only is natural that those two languages would become an amalgamation of those two to become the new language that everyone speaks. That makes natural sense to me. And I honestly, for a long time, even before reading these books, have wanted to learn Mandarin, and this kind of influences me a little bit more to do that. But yeah, so all that stuff happens there, and different things happen in different ages, where at one point humans are all living underground, basically, and there's multiple times that humans accept the fact that they're all gonna die, basically, and it just in a way, history repeats itself multiple times as well. But yeah, they had a thing called wall breakers in the first book, where basically they had almost unlimited authority and were allowed to do whatever they wanted to according to their plan, just so that the Tri-Solarians couldn't figure out what they were doing in an attempt to fool them and figure out a way to defeat them. that ended in a very tragic way. Then there was the sword holders who basically held the key, the self-destruct button to humanity, which basically the Trisolarans manipulated that all, and they basically allowed a person to become a sword holder that humans didn't respect and that Trisolarans didn't respect or fear, and it caused them to basically strike out at the humans and attack them. But once humans and Trisolarans figured out the Trisolarans weren't as strong as they thought they were, they sent out this thing which allowed they allowed the rest of the universe. They sent out a signal with the coordinates to Trisolaris, the planet of Trisolaris, and the solar system or whatever. And it caused there to be a dark forest strike on Trisolaris, like dark forest meaning unknown, like it came from an unknown source kind of thing. And what the strike was a light speed object that crashed through the sun and basically effectively destroyed it, and it basically caused the sun to explode and go supernova kind of thing, and which caused the Trisolarans to mostly be wiped out. There was still some Trisolarans in a space fleet flying out in space that managed to survive, and then there was the Trisolaran attack on the humans, where they had this thing called a droplet, which was essentially, I believe it was a couple meters in diameter, the orb part of the droplet, and they called it a droplet because it literally looked like a water droplet, but it was almost stainless steel, like perfect mirrored surface, even down to an atomic level, which is something that humans, especially at that point, had no idea how to create. And so this droplet was made from strong interaction materials, which essentially expanded the strong nuclear force of atoms and allowed them to connect together, and it created essentially an impenetrable surface. And they used these as battering rams and just flew through all the ships and destroyed them. And while most of the ships were being destroyed, one of the ships basically escaped, and when they were coming back to Earth, they were told that you guys are seen as heroes, come on back. But then when they got there, they found out, no, you're seen as traitors. You literally abandoned humanity to try and save yourself, and they were seen as war criminals. But then before they got back, they basically left again, and there was 2 human fleets flying out in space when there was a dark forest strike in our solar system. And leading up to this dark forest strike, humans had been working on 3 different technologies to save themselves in case of a dark forest strike, which at this point, the only form of dark forest strike that they knew about was light speed, a light speed object basically striking their moon. And so there's multiple ways to prevent this. One is something called a black domain, which is essentially a black hole. It's a segment of space-time where the speed of light is decreased. And what happens there is it causes it so that you basically, if you enter that zone, you'll die, and if you manage to get in there and live, you'll never be able to leave, kind of thing. Because the laws of physics are different when the speed of light is changed. Because everything we know about physics is based basically off the speed of light. Not everything entirely, but quite a bit. And so that was one of the ways. But it's extremely unfeasible, and it's almost completely theoretical when they were trying this. The second one is light speed ships, which again, quite theoretical. They had some breakthroughs where it's essentially an engine. It's like a warp drive where it flattens the space out behind you instead of being curved space, and it can propel you faster than the speed of light. And it basically cheats because you're not actually traveling through space at the speed of a light, because you're warping space around you. So it's able to cheat the speed of light through that way. But again, it was an extremely advanced technology that they had made some advancements in, but not anywhere near enough for it to be a feasible use, like way to leave or anything yet. And the third and final technology, which is the easiest to achieve, and they did achieve, is it is, I forget what they call it. It's called the bunker world, I believe. And what it was essentially they had giant ships similar to the ship, at the end of Interstellar, that it's like the rotating cylindrical ship. They basically have that idea, but multiples of them, all kind of hidden behind Jupiter, Neptune, Uranus, to protect against one of these strikes. When the sun went supernova, they would be protected by these planets in the shadows. And so that's where they were. They had this bunker world already set up when a new thing appeared, which was they called it a sheet of paper, and it was basically the size of a credit card and a transparent, but it gave off white light, so that's why they thought it looked like a piece of paper, and it would not interact with anything. They drove their ship right through it, and it just passed through the ship. They couldn't interact with it. But then somebody realized, or had a feeling in the pit of their stomach, and they're like, we got to get out of here, something's gonna happen. And sure enough, what happened was that piece of paper essentially was a dimensional weapon that folded the three-dimensional space of our solar system down into two dimensions, and the other dimension that would have been present would be lost to the quantum zone. It would be shrunk down into the quantum zone. And so basically what happens is, so you have length, width, and depth. Depth is now 0, meaning that length and width have to make up for that, and it becomes near infinity. And so the surface area expands exponentially, but there's no depth. It almost doesn't exist in our three-dimensional plane of existence. And if you are a three-dimensional being and you try to enter that two-dimensional plane, you'll essentially die, because the laws of physics that make us are different in that two-dimensional plane. And so that strike happens, and when this happens, there's a group of people, so it happens kind of near the sun, and then it slowly starts expanding out. So Venus and Mercury are first, kind of thing, and then Earth and whatever. It's slow, but most humans are trapped. But secretly, there was one spaceship that they had successfully, and without the knowledge of humans, the rest of the humans, created a light speed engine that was able to escape this dimensional strike. And also, they had created essentially a memoriam to humans on Pluto, where they carved a bunch of information into stone on Pluto and whatnot to try and make it last as long as possible. But when it went down into two dimensions, it makes it unable for a three-dimensional being to see or anything like that. So, see, probably you're confused if you've never read this book from what I've told you. And I understand why you're confused, because it's very confusing. But if you listen to the book, it's not confusing, and I understand everything I was talking about. So that's the one thing. It's the stuff that is in this book is quantum physics, string theory, really high concept science in this science fiction. So if you don't, I think you need, they do explain quite a bit of it, but if you don't understand string theory and understand all these different aspects of quantum physics and whatnot, it might make you not be able to understand what's going on in the book. And I would recommend having a basic understanding of these mathematical phenomena before venturing into this book. Who knows? I'd like to know, though, if you're not a huge fan of science and you don't already know about all this stuff and you read the book, I'd like to know your reaction if you liked it as much as I did, or if you hate it. I kind of think that people would not enjoy it if you're not big into science, but I don't know. Because the most interesting aspect of these books to me is the science, and it didn't feel as much like a series of books as it felt like a historical text laying out the events that happened in an alternate version of Earth, basically. It feels like, in some points, almost like a history book. And I mean that in the best way possible. It's the most interesting history book I've ever read. And it, like I said, it deals a lot with some really heavy science, and that's what, like I said, that's one of the most unique things about it, and why I loved it so much is because I think it's rare to find a book that uses this much science while it still almost feels a little bit like a fantasy, but it's not a fantasy. It's a it's like in Thor, when Thor's like, your ancestors called it magic, you call it science. To me, it's one and the same. The science in this book that they talk about is so advanced and so theoretical that it essentially becomes fantastical at points in the best way possible. Even though it seems like it could be fantastical, it also seems like it could be real, and that this book is essentially grounded in reality. And I honestly think that if the first book were to happen, I think the second and third book are exactly what would happen afterwards. And I cannot recommend this trilogy of books enough. If you have not read the Three Body Problem, Dark Forest, and Death's End by Cixin Liu, get out there, either read it, audible it, like listen to it, whatever you got to do to ingest this information, because I loved it. And like I said, maybe if you're not a fan of science, you won't like this. But if you love science as much as I do, you will love these books. And I don't really want to spoil the ending because it's an incredible ending. And one of the interesting things about it is, I've never read a book that takes place over so many years before. It's incredible, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. I don't, I guess, regularly have a rating system for books, but here we go. I'm going to use my movie rating system, which, in case, for those of you who don't know, the way I rate things is based on up to a 3. 0 means this should not exist. I've never given anything a 0. Like, it has to be fucking just steaming garbage for me to give it a 0. 1 means don't read it, don't watch it, whatever. I didn't enjoy it. 2 means I enjoyed this enough to say, if you get the chance, check it out. Like, for a movie, if I give a movie a 2, that kind of means, yeah, if you see it on cable, you watch it, you'll probably enjoy it, but don't pay money for it, kind of thing. And with a book, I would say a 2 is more of, if it's a 2 for a book, don't spend money on it. But if you got Audible, use your free credit that month on it, and don't feel bad, because it's still good enough that you'll probably find some enjoyment out of it. But this, I give a 3 out of 3. Honestly, this is one of my favorite trilogies of books I've ever read. I honestly can't think of a lot of trilogies of books that I've read, but including movie trilogies, this is one of my favorites. I would love for them to make these books into movies, but they couldn't. The books are individually way too long to each be a movie. And I don't want them to make a TV series based on these books, because you need a very large budget. But I don't know. Like I said, I give it a 3 out of 3. I highly recommend, if you have not read or listened to these books, definitely do it. But anyways, if you have listened or read to these books, let me know your thoughts on the trilogy by Cixin Liu in the comments down below. Or if you're listening to this on Audible, just whatever, comment. They're not Audible, whatever the fuck, SoundCloud. If you're listening to this on SoundCloud, just comment your thoughts on the subject. If you have not read the books, like I said, I highly recommend them. And hey, if you finish the first one and you don't love it, don't continue, because you don't need to. In fact, if you read the first one, you don't like it, but you still want to know the ending, tweet me at WinterTrooper, ask me, and I'll let you know. But anyways, we're pretty much done here for the day. I just wanted to add my reading, watching, or playing, which is ironic, seeing as how this whole episode has been about things I've been reading. So I finished Death's End, started reading the new Ahsoka Tano book, listening to the new Ahsoka Tano book. I forget what the author's name is, but it's actually narrated and read by Ashley Eckstein, who does the voice of Ahsoka Tano in Rebels and Clone Wars. And so it's unique in that aspect where you're the character of the main character of the book. When she talks, it's actually the actor who plays that person, which is really awesome. It adds definitely one thing that's a little bit weird and takes a little bit to get used to is the like when she does other people's voices, but it's fine. I like it still. And definitely this book is one of the better Star Wars books, and it's really interesting to fill in those gaps between basically episode 3 or whatever, when she left the Jedi Order, and then when she returns in Star Wars Rebels season 2 or end of season 1. It's fun. It's good to know that in between, and there's a big thing about kyber crystals in this book that I'm not to that point yet, but I already know what the deal is with it. But anyways, I'm really enjoying this book so far, and yeah, honestly, I can't wait to finish it. So I will probably do a review or whatever of that book when I finish it. But yeah, I'm loving it so far, and unless there's a horrible turn of events where it just becomes the shittiest book ever, I'm gonna have to recommend it. So yeah, check out that book as well. I think it's just called Ahsoka. But yeah, just go on Audible and look up Ahsoka or whatever. Go to Chapters and wherever you buy your books, Indiegogo or whatever the hell they're all called. And yeah, check that out for sure. But that's going to be it for me for this episode. I would love to say thank you. Thank you for watching, listening, however you're ingesting this. I'm just happy to have some listeners. But something that would make this all even better is if you're listening to this right now and you have any thoughts on anything that I talk about in this podcast, hit me up. You can email us whatwetalkingabouttoday@gmail.com, tweet @whatwetalking or @wintertrooper. I'll receive those and I'll either tweet right back at you, or if it's an email, I'll probably talk about it on the show. Or if it's some Twitter questions, I'll even share on the show. Like, if it's a really, really interesting topic, I'll talk about it on the show. But yeah, that's going to be it for me for this episode. I wanted to say thanks again for listening and watching and whatever. This show is also on iTunes, by the way. I never talk about it, but you can get this on iTunes. So yeah. Like, comment, share, all that good stuff. And until next time, never stop being awesome. Thanks, guys. Peace.
Glad to see you here on YouTube. Now you wonder what should I do. Staring at my faces from Memory Nation. I wanna find a place that's for conversation. Where do they discuss all the latest movies, or when something big happens in the news? See, that's us. What are we talking about? So